So simply put, a wet-dry vacuum is a vacuum cleaner that's designed to clean up both dry debris as well as wet waste. And that's the simplest explanation you can get. But what it's used for is a wide range. Before I get into that, let me talk a little bit about the differences between two kind of broad categories of wet-dry vacuums. There are those that are geared towards the commercial market, and then there are those that are geared towards the residential market. So in today's discussion, we'll focus on the commercial, but let me give you some of the key features that distinguish these two types of wet-dry vacuums. The first would be power. Generally, commercial wet-dry vacuums are more powerful, much more powerful than the residential counterpart. The second is the duty cycle. Whereas most residential vacuum cleaners are used for short periods of time in every week, a commercial wet-dry vacuum is generally designed to be operated on a daily basis for several hours. So it has a high duty cycle. The third feature is the durability. The commercial wet-dry vacuum is designed to take a beating because of the various environments it's working in and how often it's used on a daily basis even. And then the fourth might be repairability. Typically a residential vacuum, because of its cost, the way it's built, is something that if it breaks down, you're not really going to spend a lot of money to repair it, you'll replace it. Whereas in the commercial arena, you're spending quite a bit of money on the vacuum cleaners because you're buying those that are more powerful, they have a longer duty cycle, and they're more durable. The ability to repair them is one of the key features of those vacuum cleaners. So that's kind of broadly speaking, the distinguishing features between the commercial wet-dry vacuum and the residential wet-dry vacuums. And today we're going to focus on the commercial ones. There are a wide range of uses, and I think every day somebody will imagine a new use. But if I was to summarize the kinds of uses we're looking at, you would think about, say, a construction site, where there's all kinds of small and big debris on the floor, on the walls, on the sills. A wet-dry vacuum is perfect for picking those up. The second would be something like, let's say you are working or you're cleaning up or managing a facility like a school or a hospital where you've got people coming in and out on a regular basis and it's winter. They're bringing in slush and salt, and the wet-dry vacuum is perfect for cleaning that up on a regular basis. Another example might be, let's say you're a commercial cleaner who's stripping wax. Once you've finished stripping the wax, there's the stripper and the wax residue waste on the floor. You need to pick that up. A wet vac is perfect for that. You're looking at workshops, you're looking at manufacturing facilities, you're looking at processing plants. There's all kinds of places that a wet-dry vacuum is used to pick up typically large messes that include dry debris and wet debris. Typically, the principles behind a wet-dry vacuum are not different from every other vacuum, where a motor, generally an electric motor, is sucking air out of a container, and therefore in that container you're beginning to create a void, which then means you're pulling air or something else into that void. In the case of a typical dry vacuum, you're pulling air out and sucking air in, and in between you're capturing the dirt through filtration systems and the tank itself. With a wet vac, it's not different. You're pulling air out and sucking in water and air and a mixture of debris, and the filtration is typically preventing those debris from being sucked out, and because of the weight of the water, it typically fills the container. Now, as a result of there being water in a vacuum cleaner with an electric motor, there are two important safety features. One is that the motor is typically sealed off from the tank, so that it's not then a cause of electrocution. And the second is that there are shut-off systems built into those motors, so that if the water level hits a certain level, the motor will automatically shut off, so that there's no more water being sucked into the system until the tank is emptied. Having said that, there are other features of a wet-dry vacuum that we should consider. One of the most important ones of which is the filtration. Generally, a wet-dry vacuum is not great at filtering the air or the liquids that it's sucking up because that's not how it's designed. However, there are some vacuum cleaners that have additional filtration options, and let me show you a couple of those. So typically a wet-dry vacuum might have a filter like this. This is a wet filter, and if you want to use that same wet-dry filter in a dry mode, you would use something like this, or a cloth filter or a dry filter. Some are more specialized and might have something like this, which is a slurry filter. So this one is used typically when you're sucking up water which has fine particles in it, and you don't want those fine particles to get into the motor, because with a filter like this it would. So a slurry filter prevents those fine particles from penetrating into where the motor is and protects the motor and generally keeps them in the tank. There are other vacuums which need to be used in more sensitive environments, and those might contain filters like these, or HEPA filters, as well as having the cloth or the wet filters in them. And these are generally more expensive, but do provide good air filtration in addition to being able to suck up water. So when you look at the commercial market, there are generally two types or two categories of wet-dry vacuums we can talk about. One is the category of specialized wet-dry vacuums. So these are usually very expensive. They are made by very few manufacturers, and they are geared toward designed for some very specific applications. And let me illustrate that for you. For example, we were recently at a factory that makes roofing tiles, shingles. And those shingles have a lot of sand on them. The sand is stuck onto those shingles with an adhesive. But there's a lot of sand that falls out of that process. But that sand is saturated with water, so it's very heavy. So a typical wet-dry commercial vacuum will not pick it up. You need something specialized that has a large hose that can take a big volume, as well as a lot of power. And then it must have a storage tank or some system to dispose of that it doesn't require changing frequently, because it's a huge volume of stuff that you're picking up. So very specialized type of vacuum cleaner for that industrial setting. The second category of wet-dry vacuums in the commercial space would be the more general type, and there's a wide range of them. And these are generally used for multiple purposes, and they're distinguished generally by the following categories, if you will. One is where they're made, right? So you've got vacuum cleaners that are made in Italy, made in China, made in Germany, and made right here in Canada. We've got vacuum cleaners that are distinguished by their price range. And these things range from anything from $100 to $3,000 for a general wet-dry vacuum cleaner. The third might be tools. And the types of tools that are available differ by product type. So you could have some products or some machines that are very basic and come with two tools, and that's it. There's not really many options for you to customize it. Whereas there are others which are the higher end type products which you can customize to your specific needs. Add tools as you need, or find specific tools to the purpose that you're looking for, almost like an a la carte menu of tools available to you for that type of wet-dry general vacuum cleaner. The other thing to think about is the tank size. So again, the smaller the tank, the more frequently you have to empty it if you are picking up large volumes of dirt. The third might be the performance specs. So you're looking at, how do these perform in terms of their power consumption, their CFM, or their flow of air, cubic feet per minute, or you're looking at the lift, inches of lift, which is the power to suck. That's another thing to consider. You might have to consider maintenance requirements. Like if you are repairing these machines, are parts available? Where do you find them from? What are they like? You look at duty cycle, which is how have they been designed? What kind of motors do they have? And do those motors align themselves to being used constantly all the time? Or are they motors designed for infrequent use? And then finally, you would consider price, because that's one of the key things in terms of your selection. Now, the reason I explain the type of vacuum this way, it's very hard to pinpoint one specific generic type of wet-dry vacuum because there's such a wide range of wet-dry vacuums out there. If I had to select a vacuum cleaner for my use, what are the things I would think about? The first thing I would think about is the frequency of use. How often do I need to use this wet-dry vacuum? If I do need to use it a lot, I want to spend money and get a good one which will last me a long time and that has a long duty cycle. If on the other hand I'm using it occasionally, then perhaps it's not worth spending a lot of money on it, and therefore I could get something simpler, perhaps from a big box store. The second thing I would think about is the specific application. What kind of tools do I need? Is it a general cleanup, or do I have some very specialized needs? If I have a specialized need, I might go find the tool that will drive me to the right kind of vacuum cleaner that I need to buy in order to do the job, as opposed to the other way around. The third thing I would think about is the size of the reservoir, because again, if I'm working in a dusty wood shop and I'm only picking up mostly wood chips and stuff like that, I may not need to empty it every hour. If on the other hand I'm trying to empty a flooded basement, then I want to have as big a tank as I can find. The other thing is I would ask myself is, what's my primary use? If I find that my primary use is dry and I need occasional wet, then I'll focus on getting myself a good dry vacuum that has good filtration, and then compromise on the wet vacuum side and pick up something that may be less expensive. On the other hand, if my primary job is picking up wet debris or wet waste, then I'd look for something that is specialized in that and compromise a little bit on the dry. But that's always going to be one of the challenges we have, is compromising between the filtration of a dry and the efficacy of a wet vacuum. And then finally, I would ask myself the question about the filtration requirements. How sensitive is the environment I'm working in? Am I working in a lab, a hospital, or school? And if that's the case, then maybe I do need to have a wet-dry vacuum that has a HEPA filter on it. If on the other hand, it's a construction site, HEPA filtration may be irrelevant, and I'd go for something more basic. So those are all the things I would consider. And then finally, I'd look at my budget and say, what can I afford to get? Because as I said earlier, the prices range from $100 to $3,000, and you can spend anything in between that. So it really depends on what it is your specific need is.